Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
People think that a locally owned and operated appliance store may not offer what they need. Actually, we have trained and dedicated sales associates, expert delivery and installation, professional repair service, and personal customer service. Plus, we have access to a huge local warehouse with over 6,000 models in stock. Crane Appliance. We call the Cape and Islands home. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by MegaNet Communications. MegaNet offers a wide array of internet services including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server colocation, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
The Quarterdeck Restaurant, located on Main Street in the heart of Falmouth, specializing in fresh local seafood and other classic American cuisine, featuring a full bar with friendly staff. And the Bucatino Restaurant and Wine Bar, located in North Falmouth just off Nathan Ellis Highway, featuring catering services with 2 full event rooms serving up classic Italian cuisine. The Quarterdeck Restaurant and Bucatino Restaurant and Wine Bar, we're here to serve all our friends in Falmouth.
Get started in just 3 seconds. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 4th, 2021 Falmouth Select Board meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order by doing a roll call. When I call out your name, please note that you are present. Just to remind everyone that we are conducting this in accordance with the governor's regulations, which are allowing for virtual meetings such as this. Given the COVID-19 pandemic, individuals are able to participate in real time by logging into this Zoom session and participating via chat or being entered in as a panelist so that they can make a comment. If individuals need instructions on that, all of that information, as it has been since, I guess, March, is available at the town website on the Select Board's webpage. And for folks who aren't comfortable doing that and do not feel comfortable navigating it, they can reach out to us in advance of a meeting, and we are happy to convey any concerns or comments you have either for the items on the agenda or during the public comment portion of our meeting, which is to address issues not on our agenda. So we really encourage folks to find a way that they feel most comfortable participating so that our meetings continue to have that robust input from the public that really helps shape our policy and our discussions. Okay, so if you will just note that you're here. Patterson?
Patterson present.
Taylor?
Taylor present.
Brown?
Brown present.
Jones?
Jones present.
Okay. And we also, English Braga present. We also have with us Julian Suso, Town Manager, Peter Johnson-Staub, Assistant Town Manager, as well as Mr. Cox and Mr. Shanahan from our IT department, who really are here to troubleshoot and assist both the board and individuals who would like to participate in our discussion. So with that, I would ask you to please join me in a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America,
And to the republic
for which it
to the republic
one nation,
for which it stands, one
one
nation,
nation under
under
God.
God, with liberty
indivisible.
and justice for all.
Boy, that didn't go very well.
No,
That was really
These freeze ups
didn't go very well, but we still
connections.
haven't figured out how to, yeah. Still
think
haven't
you're-
figured out how to do that smoothly.
Megan, I think your connection is delayed at times, so you're freezing up. At least that's my perspective.
I'll see how it goes. If I have to move to another section, I'll try to move to another section of the office if it continues. Thankfully tonight, I think we're just going to be receiving a lot of information, so hopefully it'll be pretty smooth. Anything for recognition? I know, Mr. Patterson, that you had wanted to note something.
Yeah, I want to highlight that our police chief, Ed Dunn, was actually elected to the presidency position of the Massachusetts Association of Police Chiefs. And so he's being asked to pick up that responsibility. And I think it's in recognition of his outstanding service here in Falmouth.
Great, thank you.
And
Anything from the rest of the board?
just, recognition again for the people that are working in the healthcare field right now. They're really struggling with this second huge wave, and not just locally, but nationwide. So my thoughts and prayers go out to them and all they're dealing with. And again, the families that are impacted by COVID, well, it's such a difficult thing to go through. You can't visit them or, comfort them. So I'm sorry for those people that are dealing with all that.
Yeah, yep, Nancy.
along that same line, the teachers, same thing with teachers who are working with our kids every day. This up and down of going back to remote, it's got to be really stressful on the teachers as well as any of the students.
I know.
So I think they're doing an amazing job.
Just when they were starting to get into a groove, they had to rethink it all and change it up again.
Yeah, but kudos also to the school committee and to Superintendent Dewar and her staff for trying to really get ahead, and the other superintendents on the Cape trying to get ahead of what may have been a holiday spike, and trying to really think proactively as hard as it can be, because it's a moving target. So we definitely are, we know it's hugely disruptive to families to have to go back to remote, especially for the younger children. So we definitely are just keeping all of them and the teachers and all those kids and their families in our thoughts. So and I know we'll hear from Scott in a little bit to give us an update. Sam?
Yeah, I actually want to recognize all those teachers that when they have been exposed to somebody that is suspected of having COVID-19, of calling in and letting the administration know that, so that they can be covered. Also want to recognize all those people who have stepped up to provide substitute services to the schools, because they have been really hard pressed to fill in for the staff that have not been able to show up because of the potential threat that they have been exposed to, and they're therefore carrying COVID-19. They've been struggling, and it's a big challenge. And when you're trying to teach kids, from my own experience, and I'm sure Doug and Nancy can attest to it, it is really difficult to keep a linear kind of a continuous flow of information and building on what students are learning when it's disrupted like that, and different people are coming in and out of the classroom. It makes it pretty tough.
Yep. So
And
anything else?
You too, Megan. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have left you out. You were a past teacher.
Yeah, those are the good old days. Before I made really poor decisions and went on a different career path. But any announcements from the board? Mr. Sousa, would you just give the announcements about the upcoming precinct meetings?
Certainly. Yeah, happy to confirm. Whoops, am I unmuted? Yes, okay. Happy to confirm that we have 2 upcoming virtual precinct meetings. And I know we had announced earlier that we're working closely to facilitate the upcoming January 25th virtual town meeting. And this is in furtherance of that. Town meeting members have received communications within the past month from Town Clerk Michael Palmer regarding this process. And these 2 virtual precinct meetings, you will be receiving, this is town meeting members, an email, and it'll be coming from quote, virtual town meeting at falmouthma.gov. So that will be the sender, virtual town meeting at falmouthma.gov, 2 town meeting members announcing the 2 upcoming virtual precinct meetings. The first will be this Thursday, January 7th, and the second virtual precinct meeting will be Wednesday, January 13th. Both of them will be at 7 p.m. and pre-registration is required. So when town meeting members receive the email notifying them of this, they do need to step up and become involved if they want to participate in the virtual precinct meetings. And this affords an opportunity for a couple of dry runs on the entire process in advance of January 25th. So we strongly encourage any and all to participate and assist us in fine-tuning and making certain that this process works as well as it possibly can. So I do want to thank all my colleagues for their steadfast work in pulling this together. I mentioned Town Clerk Michael Palmer, of course, Select Board Chair Megan English Braga has been closely involved as moderator, David Vieira, and several staff members as well as our colleagues in IT. So thank you for the excellent assistance there. We're looking forward to these virtual precinct meetings and this further unfolding as we move toward January 25th.
Great. Thank you, Julian. I do see that there is that Jessica Rittenauer would like to make a comment. I guess we can do it during public comment. I think it's more of an announcement, but since we're moving into public comment, we can fit it in there unless there are any other announcements from the board. Seeing none, while we let Ms. Rittenauer in, please, I will just remind folks, public comment is an opportunity for individuals to make up to a 2-minute comment on an item not on our agenda. Because it isn't on our agenda, the board is not allowed under open meeting law to respond back or engage in a dialogue with you about it. It's an opportunity for you to just speak about something that you either need to let the community know about, as is probably the case here, or that you'd like to raise, for the board for perhaps a future agenda item. And so welcome, Jessica, and go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening and Happy New Year. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Episcopal Church, the Outreach Committee, and this is a public meeting series that we're announcing entitled "What is the Climate Emergency?" This is a program that is beginning on Wednesday, January 13th, and will continue on Wednesdays until February 3rd. St. Barnabas is hosting this in part because Falmouth, along with 11 other Cape Cod towns, have declared a climate emergency, the declarations that were made in 2020. So the public series is aimed at building consensus and building common understanding about the state of the planet. The desired outcome of the series is to spark discussions led by the community for the community in order to determine emergency responses. So tonight I'm here to announce to the public and to the select board, we are working on our outreach throughout the community. The meetings will be held on Zoom and they're free and open to all. Registration is required and folks who are interested should reach out to stboutreach@gmail.com, and that's stboutreach@gmail.com. There's information on Facebook and the St. Barnabas website as well. We're really hoping to have a robust community discussion about this really important issue. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other public comment? I don't see any. I do see a comment from Courtney Bird, but that'll be for an item that's actually on our agenda later on in the evening. I'm just checking to see if there's any other, no, I don't see any other public comment. So I think that we are going to move forward, and we will have the first order of business, which is to discuss and get an update on COVID-19 issues from our health agent, Scott McGann. I see him coming on now.
Hi,
Welcome,
everybody.
Scott.
Hi, everybody. You ready for me?
We're ready.
All right. I'm going to share screen. Everybody up and see it okay?
Yes.
Okay. So just because I usually do my COVID FCTV spots on Friday, I broke it. This is Friday's data. So our case counts actually, as of this morning, would be about 730 cases. So we had, as of January 1st, 715, now 730 cases since the beginning. I started to put in probable because the convenient MD and a couple of the physician's office, especially pediatricians, have started to bring in some rapid testing. So we've always dealt with confirmed because we had so few actual antigen tests being taken in Falmouth. Now I'm starting to show that in there because it will keep some of the, now you don't really add them up because some people that get antigen tests will go ahead and get a PCR. So they're not completely additive, but some people will just stop at the antigen. So it does tend to depress the actual count a little bit because we're dealing with confirmed. So we just put that out there on there. So 51 cases over the past week, about 75% or so. I think to ask selectmen, I believe, I can't remember who asked me last week. One of the last time we were here was about, I think we have about 90 active cases, right around 100 active cases. Got a question. I did have that looked up. It's not an easy thing to pull out. I actually have to ask the VNA to run the report because they have a fancy way of doing it. But yeah, so we have about 100 people roughly of the 790 to 100 people that are still active. And that's to be expected because we had so much cases over the last couple of weeks, they wouldn't be quite out of isolation yet. Good news on the contact tracing, the VNA and the CTC has added a ton of staff. Both myself and my public health nurse, Kathy, have been doing a lot of filling in the gaps when the CTC didn't get a response or didn't make another return call. The CTC's increased staff, so they're contacting people daily. The VNA is still doing their thing, and we link the dots because sometimes cases will fall to the CTC, sometimes to the VNA, and we look at them in case some of them need to be linked together in clusters and things of that case. So that's where we are. Looking at our chart that we do up every week, you can see that we're definitely much higher than we've ever been, though we don't know exactly how many we had back in April. because it was so hard to get a test. Now, the three dots that are closest together that represent the end of November, early December, half of the 40% or so of those are long-term care. The 83 cases of the previous week, Christmas week, and the 51 cases of last week represent mostly community spread. There is some nursing home. There is some clusters that have been created through different congregate care, retail business, and things of that nature. Most of the cases are from gatherings, from seeing the people that you see every day and not expecting the 10 group of friends that you or coworkers that you see. So most of those cases are one or two offs, not necessarily giant clusters. There is a few going on, but so it's definitely community spread. So there's no doubt there isn't community spread going on. Talking about the schools, Lori and I had a conversation last week. We actually had that conversation in September, right? But before schools opened, I had a conversation with her about what we're going to do the 2 weeks after Thanksgiving and Christmas, and those two times, and something we might want to consider. So we had it in our back pocket early on. We brought up the conversation. If you see back right after Thanksgiving, we were in that sort of 25, 20 range, and all of a sudden we're at 80 or 75. So that's like a threefold increase. You take 75 and you multiply by 3, you're at 225. And is that what our cases are going to be in a week? So it's reasonable to say that, there would be some gatherings occurring and getting together and so forth. And the decision that Lori made was to go remote for a week to see that the dust settle on what's happened over the last two holidays that we had. And so, that's kind of where we are with our individual cases. Of course, our growth, we were nice and flat earlier in the summer, and then this has gone off the hook. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this. Just to cover like where we are in terms of our color code. Again, 43 cases and less than a 5% positivity, greater than 43 cases, less than 5% positivity keeps us yellow. If we're both greater than 5% positivity and greater than 43 cases, we would red. There's quite a few Cape towns that are red. Barnstable and Yarmouth are red, for example. I think Mashpee might have gone red. We've been able to stay yellow, although our number was 4.2% for the week, partially not because we had more cases. If you look at 1224 and 1231, we're about the same. It's because our testing went down because you lost a day with the holiday, right? So you lose Christmas as a testing day, it went down. You'll lose another day. So next week's test will also be lower. We've been able to manage to stay yellow, which is good. I mean, we've been above average for the county for the most part throughout the pandemic. Sometimes a little bit worse, sometimes a little bit better, sometimes right spot on. We're definitely doing better than the state. Our incidence rate is roughly half of what the state's is, and our positivity is a couple percent down over the same time frame. This time frame would have been from the 13th to the 26th. That's the most recent data we have from the state. So, that's where we are with the cases. It's not good. And, we're aggressively, contact tracing and setting up clusters and doing the things that we've been doing all along. It's just at a much higher volume. When you get this many cases, it's a lot more work. So needless to say, we've been, burning the midnight oil, trying to get through everything. County cases continue on the rise. It's been, it's been on a high level now for, over a month. Hospitalizations. I find this one interesting. If you look at the bottom, you see on 1/3/21, between Cape Cod and Falmouth Hospital, 44 hospitalizations, 9 ICU, with Falmouth being 16 and 2. If you go up to the top, you can see on April 21st, we're kind of near where we were 46 and 13, relatively close to what we were in April. So our hospitalizations are very similar to what they were at the peak in April. And so, that isn't, it's indicative of all the cases, and, that's where we're at. And so the hospital's fighting it. And again, this is, been growing, and it's been high now for over a week. You can see 1229 has also been relatively the same. So cases remain high. As far as what the public can do, you need to start thinking, like I said last meeting, about what everybody was doing. We did a good job not flattening the curve. It's not a term we use as much anymore, but we have to reflatten the curve and do some of the same practices and limit travel and limit the amount of exposure that you have by not doing as many things that you might have been doing in the summer and in the early fall. And so, that's kind of what people need to do. And because their exposure is much higher now than it's been at any point other than maybe at the beginning of the pandemic, right? So it just is what it is. So that's the bad news. Okay, I'm gonna start with the good news. COVID vaccine. Okay, so we're currently in phase 1. All right, so that is Cape Cod Healthcare, the clinical, the non-clinical healthcare workers. The long-term care is starting to be done this week. As far as the health department's role, okay, so our role has not been clearly defined. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead of myself, but we're averaging 20 to 30 calls a day of when people can get their vaccine from the health department. Right now, we're getting things dribs and drabs. We're getting information on an as-needed basis from the state. What the state has asked us to said 2 things. First off, the health department won't be a depot, meaning that other entities that want to get a vaccine in Falmouth would not come to the health department. So if a doctor's office would go directly to the state rather than coming to the health department to get it, like they used to do in the old days. And secondly, they asked us to take care of the police, fire, and emergency medical services. And as of the 11th, so next Monday, the Sandwich Fire Department, actually interesting, their fire chief is an epidemiologist by trade, which is awesome, and jumped in on it and said, hey, why don't you have the 4 Upper Cape Towns come to Sandwich and we'll take care of that. So it took it off my plate and I will take that. And so our police, fire, and first responders will have an opportunity starting next week to get their vaccination. Congregate care settings are going to come in as they come in, and so that kind of goes down. So what the state's asked us to do is to take care of that, which we have. And they haven't given us a lot of information about our role in each one of these individual ones. Obviously, the health department having vaccine clinics will be something that we'll be doing. It's just, it's a little tough now just not knowing all the details. Am I going to be doing 25% of the population at dribs and drabs of 500 doses here and 500 doses there? Or are they going to, airdrop, 20,000 doses and say good luck? I don't know. So we don't quite know exactly, when and all this is going to play out and exactly all the details yet. Even things like, the state's developing a software program for scheduling so that all the people get scheduled through the same program so that it's easy for the state to know who's been vaccinated. That program isn't that program hasn't been fully developed yet. It's got some bugs and they're working it out. So that's still, it's still a little frustrating because I'd love to be able to have everything planned out this far in advance, but it's impossible to plan it out this far in advance. It's impossible for me to take names and numbers at this point. We'll advertise the heck out of it when it comes to the time to do it. It's just that we don't have all the information. We don't have all the ducks in a row, and so to let you know about as far as emergency planning, we at the health department after 9/11 with the anthrax scare, were charged by the state to have an emergency dispensing site set up. So I have a box that that holds a lot of documents, and I've got a memory stick that's full with an emergency preparedness plan, emergency dispensing site plan. Our current sites are the high school and the Gus Canty, but they were set up for mainly a large, quick, fast turnaround vaccination type of situation. This is going to be a much longer duration, probably not coming to, getting all the doses all at once type of situation where we need to have a standing clinic that might be open for 2-3 months. Okay, so we have to find a spot that's going to be more suitable for a 2 or 3 month. I don't think I can use the high school, every day for 2 months, right? So we're going to be working on that this week, Julian and Peter, myself, and Peter McConaty, and we'll be working on, getting a site that's going to work. There's a lot going to go on into a site. I'd like to have it drive through. I think, some of the feedback I've gotten through is people would not want to be walking into a building, especially because their first dose does not give them immunity. That makes sense. But then you don't need a nurse who's been standing outside in the freezing cold rain with shivering hands to try to give you a needle in her arm. So that doesn't work either. So it needs to be sort of a inside drive through, much like we're doing with the tests we're doing the COVID testing over at the fairgrounds, which might be the place that we can work it out, might be the place to do it. So we're on that, now. And as we get more details, we jump on them and do the best we can with everything. So, that's kind of where we are with the vaccine. When is still up for grabs, and it's all going to lay out. I wish the state would give me more information on a more, in a longer term, so it gives us a better chance to, do long-term planning. We just ask that people don't call. One of the things is if you call, and I try to give people, and explain things, if I spend we probably spent, 2 hours of staff time talking to people and saying that we don't have the vaccine available. So it only sort of clogs my ability and our ability to sort of do contact tracing or do other things. So please don't call to schedule at this point. We're not at that point. You don't know the roles of your physicians. We don't know the roles of, pharmacies. Is it all going to come to the health department? Is it going to come into a lot of different places that you might be able to get it? We don't know that detail quite yet. One thing I did want to say is medical personnel that may want to volunteer. You can call the MRC, which is the Medical Reserve Corps. Diana Gamond is the director. There's her phone number there, 375-6641. They will be taking nurses and doctors. I get about a half dozen calls in a week, which is great. Instead of me taking a clearinghouse, they get vetted through the MRC director. And then when I need to pull nurses for the MRC to do clinics, then we have them available. So anybody who wants to do that should go through Diana and she'll be able to vet. So the clinic is going to be big. It's going to be all hands on deck. It's going to be a lot of different departments, IT, communication, police, fire, when I need to cry, I call Julian or Peter. Just kidding. So it's just a lot of things, it's just a lot of stuff, a lot of different departments. We'll get it all pulled together. We have the EDS plan, so we have a lot of this stuff already set up. It's just, getting into the finer details as I get the details sent over to us. So that's kind of what I had for an update, and open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Scott. As always, these visuals are really helpful. Go ahead, Sam.
Yes, Scott, I understand that you can't tell us anything right now, but who do you expect to actually contact us to basically set up an appointment for vaccination?
What we would do is do, all the different releases, all the different methods to say, look, call. How I envision is this: we would open up the EOC. Okay, we have a dedicated call lines already in place. We would have staff there with a computer with PrepMod. PrepMod is the state software program that we're going to schedule through. And we'll be taking the appointments as they come in. So the hard part's going to be if I get 600, do I choose Sam or Doug, right? Does that, that gets a little bit tricky. I don't know exactly that kind of level of detail. But we would have staff sitting there. Either it could be an online registration or a phone in or both. It'll probably need to be a hybrid. Not everybody uses the computer. And we would tell people that if you're over age 65 to start calling. Now, how we would be able to, obviously, if I told everybody call Monday, February 14th, starting at 8 a.m., and anybody over 65, I'm going to get 4,000 phone calls, right? It's going to really be, so there has to be that kind of level of detail still needs to be worked out as how we'd be able to do that, right? But it would be, online registration plus phone calls, and we would get our way through it.
And the announcement as to who's eligible is going to be where?
Well, we would announce it as it comes in. So it's on that sheet. The blue one I sent you. It's going to go into that method, and then when the state says start doing 65 and older, we'll start doing 65 and older. So we're just going to follow the punch list as it comes when the state tells us to do it.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is because Florida said first come first serve, and they were just totally inundated.
Yeah,
people literally were spending the entire night ahead, hoping to get in line.
Yeah.
And the same will be true of phone calling and emailing. So is it going to be posted on the town's website?
Yeah, it will be. There's no way of making it clean. There's just no way. It's like Black Friday was 10 years ago. Like everybody lines up at Walmart there's going to be an element to that, no doubt about it. And it looks like, as much like the feds have basically said, wash their hands of it and sent it to the states and told the states to figure it out. Don't be surprised if the states wash their hands and send it to the local health departments and say, you guys figure it out.
Well,
Sam, it's what keeps me up at night. It's what gives me the gray hairs underneath here. I mean, honestly, we don't have all the answers. It's like trying to fly a plane while still building it, if that makes sense to everybody. Okay, we're trying to fly the plane while still building it. We have an EDS, we have a plan. I know how to run a clinic. I know the cars go this way and everybody waits for 15 minutes and goes out. But the details of how everybody's going to get registered in a clean, orderly fashion is going to be really difficult. By the number of calls I'm getting alone, I know everybody wants it and they want it now.
Maybe we should consult the guys at Boeing.
The Wright brothers, right? Did they built it as they were going? So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. I don't have all the answers, and that's why we need to bring everybody together who's got answers, and and that's what we got to do.
But I think the good news is, as you said, Scott, that, some pieces of it you've done in some capacity. Some of that running a clinic, we've done from different agencies, large testing, rollouts in terms of, just kind of the logistics. So I know this will be different and it'll be at a level that we've never seen before, but it does have elements to public health that you and the other public health partners have engaged in, particularly around this issue in the last 8 months. So, hopefully we can lean on that and use some of what we already know.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at, the possibility of regional clinics. We meet once a week on that. The details just don't have all the detail. I mean, if you drop me 5,000 shots and said I got 2 weeks to get rid of it and it has to start tomorrow, well, I'll figure it out. I mean, it's not, that's but the hard part's what Sam said. It's the scheduling and who gets it and that sort of part. So I kind of look at it, and my first initial is to have 2 different managers of it. We'll have the admin at the EOC working out that, prep mod and scheduling. And then that group gives the list to the operations staff, and the operations people are the ones with the boots on the ground, working with the CERT teams and working with the volunteers to actually be there, physically get the clinics. I mean, the vaccine has to be picked up every day. It has to be handled correctly. It comes in, the doses have to be drawn out. That's why outdoors is difficult. You're going to get a 10-dose vial. The nurses have to pull that out. It's not as clean as and simple as, everything. So there's a lot of little things that get worked out, and, we'll get through it. I just wish I had more information about what we need to do from the state, instead of saying, they're still asking me, worry about first responders. Well, okay, I've done that. Let's go on to the next. Okay, what's next?
Right. Yep. Doug Brown.
But I got one concern is, will we have enough hypodermic syringes?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope, it's part of the packet. So yeah, would there be a sort of a demand on it like there was for, hand sanitizer early on? There might be. I hope they have ramped up.
If we get stuck with delivering it, then we're going to have to come up with a lot of syringes, right?
Oh yeah, and alcohol swabs and things to wipe your hands. Those everything. Yeah, all the supplies are all an issue. Yeah.
In that regard, my son happens to work for a company in Connecticut that actually manufactures syringes. He said his company's not going to be making those syringes because there's another couple of companies that can make the right size syringe in high volume. That's what they do. No human touches it from the time that the needle stock comes in and the glass comes up until it's in a blister pack. But the question is, will we have it delivered along with the doses here to Falmouth so that you have what you need to vaccinate us? I think that's the question. Who's managing the inventory and the distribution? Because we've already seen what the federal government did.
Well, the states, I don't know what the states, again, that level of detail, they haven't given me the basic detail, never mind that level of detail. So I don't know. Luckily you guys let me, and Julian helped me. We hired a public health nurse, and that person, she's done clinics in Sandwich for decades. So, the nuance, I'm not a nurse, so the nuances of the needles and stuff is really going to be up Kathy's wheelhouse, and she'll take care of that kind of, making sure. But obviously, yes, we can't show up to a clinic with a bunch of vials of doses and no way to administer it. It all goes part and parcel, gloves, all the other stuff that go with it.
Right. Any other questions for Scott? Anyone? I'm just going to take a peek and see if there's any public questions. I don't see any. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it. And we will talk to you next week. Thanks. Bye. I'm just going to take out of order. I'm going to take out of order the next business item, which is, rather than start with the presentation, I do want to do the discuss mission statement in charge of the Cable Advisory Committee, because I do think that we are going to address it in a slightly different manner. So, Mr. Suso, would you just like to set that piece up? And then I see your hand up, Doug Brown.
Certainly, I was just going to mention that hopefully Michael Eder, who's the chair of our Cable Advisory Committee, is with us and the IT can let him join in this dialogue if,
He may or may not. Oh, okay. I spoke with him earlier today also.
Great. Looks
yeah,
like he's
I
coming
know
on.
He did reach out and mentioned that possibly he'd be joining us, so, okay.
Great. Looks like he's coming on. And then I will read a public comment after that from Courtney Bird, relevant to this particular issue. We'll wait till Michael comes on.
So I had requested we put this on the agenda, and I didn't realize it was going to come up so quickly. And so I did over the weekend reach out to the Falmouth Net group as well as to the Cable Advisory Committee, just to make sure they were aware that we were going to be discussing it and to get some feedback. And so, sure, Mr. Eater,
That's a different Michael.
Yeah.
So when I spoke to Mr. Eater again today, and I told him I would take his advice that it's a little early for this discussion right now because they're in the middle of trying to finalize the contract with Comcast about the cable TV.
Right.
There's a lot at stake, there's the funding of FCTV services and so forth. So they don't want to cloud that with discussing this right now, as well as the Falmouth Net group. I spoke to not only Courtney, but other members of that group. They too are concerned that they'd like to make their presentation to us prior to initiating any kind of action, whether it's advancing the cable committee or creating another entity or whatever. So all people that I've spoken to wish that we would just hold this for now.
Yep. So that's what we're going to do. That is the request of sort of all the real, significant players that are going to assist us and advise us on these items. So I don't know, maybe Michael, just because I took it out of order, I may have, thrown a wrench in the works, but we are going to table this particular issue for a later date. What I will do now, though, is just read into the record Courtney Bird's comment, because I know that he sent this a little while ago. So comment for BOS agenda item entitled Discussion, Mission Statement, and Charge of the Cable Advisory Committee. Last June, the EDIC voted $50,000 to fund and conduct a feasibility study at the urging of the Falmouth Network Committee. And that study found that a community-based fiber optic broadband network was feasible for Falmouth. The 200-plus page report detailed costs, construction methodology, financing, and options for operating it, from the town, a nonprofit, to a public-private partnership, to a private company, and variants in between. The report also said that for the initiative to succeed, it had to have a champion, an individual or group, to push the project forward and work closely with stakeholders to guide the process. As this initiative has unfolded, the Network Committee worked closely with the EDIC on the feasibility study and is now planning a public education campaign to build community support. To do that, it takes money. Sorry, I just have to scroll down. And so we have incorporated as a nonprofit and applied for a 501c3 status under the name Falmouth Net Incorporated. But the role the town government takes is crucial for where that initiative goes from here. Simultaneously, the town's contract with Comcast expires in the near future, and that adds an extra dimension for the town to consider because its ramifications for FCTV, the schools, and the community. The two issues are intertwined. At this point, there needs to be a presentation to the Board of Selectmen of the feasibility study. And my understanding from Mike DiGiano, Executive Director of the EDIC, and Sam Patterson was that that was in the works. In any event, that presentation should take place and the board should digest the feasibility study report before the BOS looks at the role of the CAC or creates a new committee/working group. This little final part here, the BOS should consider what role the town will play in the creation of a Falmouth community network first, and if it decides that the town should be a player, then it should create an entity at that time to consider the options and to implement a course of action. The feasibility study is an invaluable resource for the board and a must read. Additionally, Falmouth Net is an important resource as well because of our expertise and knowledge of the players both locally and nationally. At this stage, considering changing the function of the CAC or creating a new committee is a case of putting the cart before the horse, and that is Courtney Bird. Again, this was an issue that was raised by a number of folks, and we found a place to fit it in the agenda, but given all the things that we've just noted, it is a bit premature, so we're going to hold off on addressing it, and we'll do so at a later date. Julian?
Yes, Madam Chair, I just also wanted to mention that Jennifer Mullen, our Finance Director, is the staff liaison working with the Cable Advisory Committee, and obviously she's with us here this evening to be participating in the budget presentation as well. So I was going to ask my colleagues on IT to be elevating Jennifer in anticipation of that on the agenda. I don't know that Jennifer would have any comments about this particular issue, but she certainly is involved with the committee. So I just wanted to confirm
Great.
that.
Hi, Jennifer. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. You've covered it beautifully.
Okay. Oh.
Really, those were my comments. We're in the middle of Comcast negotiations. I do want to mention that the committee is a 5-member committee. There's only 3 people on it right now. We
Right.
just had a resignation, and we're really trying to get through, ascertainment hearing and things of that nature, just so we can come to conclusion for October.
So thank you for reminding us about that, Jennifer. That was on my list to just, give a little bit of a shout out, and Julian, we can follow up with Diane posting. But since we have, folks' eyes and ears right now, it's a really important committee, but as we can hear, even more so, in the coming months and years. And so, we would hope that some folks would show some interest in participating. We have those spots, and all committees, goes without saying, are much more effective when they are fully filled out with individuals who bring their own passion, expertise, and thoughtfulness to these issues. So let's try and post for that again, and we can try and get folks on there. Yes, Sam.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I think that the skill set that's required by the committee members is quite different for a community network that's using fiber optic technology and such. Serves a different community in the sense of TV cable versus the broader internet capability, which goes way beyond TV, including, community access channels for FCTV and the school department. So I think we should think twice about lumping it together. If we do, I think we need to expand that committee, and have it, broadened in terms of the scope of its efforts, so that the right kind of people join that committee.
So are we having this discussion tonight or not?
No, we're going to put the issue over, but I do see that we have, we did have some comments about it because it was on the agenda, so we did want to address where it's going to go. There is one question asking if there'll be a public comment meeting with the CAC and Comcast. Jennifer, do you know? I'm assuming that there is.
Yes, we do want to, it's an ascertainment hearing, so we're, I think Mr. Sousa will be talking to you about that to try to get it on the agenda in February.
Great.
It will be a public hearing.
Okay, so
and that's mandated, for the negotiations.
Okay, so for Ms. Snowman, keep your eye out on the agenda. That should come up. Okay, next we are going to move on to the presentation of proposed fiscal year 2022 budget. Welcome, Jennifer, and please go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to be here this evening. Thomas Cox is going to run the presentation for me and share the screen. So I'll start off, with the presentation, just an overview, and then, we can open it up to Q&A if you'd like. So first slide, please. So let me just go back to when I last December or last January, when we presented the budget, it's very different. The circumstances were very different than they are right now. When we presented the budget last January, COVID wasn't a factor, and actually that is when a lot unfolded regarding the override. So I just wanted to start off with that. So when we went into the budget process in June and we voted the budget, I significantly reduced estimated revenues, the local receipts, and state aid, because there's a lot we don't know. And so the FY21 budget was very different of what was voted than what was presented last January. I guess that's basically what I want to say. And when we look at the estimated revenues so far, they're somewhat strong. They're stronger than what I anticipated, which is good news. And state aid came in level funded. So, we're in really good shape for the fiscal year that we're in. But that really sets up FY22. We're probably one of the first communities that I know of that are going to present their FY22 budget. It is, it is soon. We have our town meeting in April. A lot of other communities have it in May. So there's a lot that we don't know right now. I do want to mention that state aid was level funded for FY21. We really don't know what's going to happen in fiscal year 22. They had a revenue hearing December 15th, but they really haven't released any information on that. So I did project a 8.5% decrease in state aid. And we did see some of our free cash decline. Now we're looking at a town meeting virtual January 25th, where we will vote the capital plan. So that hasn't, usually, obviously, we had it in November, didn't have a quorum, but our free cash has declined a little bit. Next slide, please. So, with the vaccine, and you just heard from Scott, we are projecting an economic recovery in FY22. Hopefully people will start traveling again. Last summer we did see a level of hotel motel tax. We did see a decrease in meals tax, but I'm hoping that this summer will be stronger than last summer. So we are projecting an economic recovery in FY22. So I did project an increase in local receipts, but I projected a decrease in state aid. Next slide, please. As you recall, in FY21, when we presented the budget in June, we did not fund any of the reserves for 1 year because we were facing so many unknowns, but we will resume funding the Capital Stabilization Fund and other post-employment benefit funds. Fund in FY22. We really want to get back to the basis of our fiscal policy to maintain our financial stability, which we've been able to do so far. And again, I feel good about 21, so we want to continue that into 22. Next slide, please. So I figured I'd just, throw up, usually what I do when I do this budget presentation is let you know what we have in our reserve. So in our general stabilization fund, we have 6.8 million, our capital 4.9. Our debt stabilization is 1.5. Our SPED is 976,000, and other post-employment benefits is 1.3 million. Next slide, please. So now I get to this is where I usually start my presentation every year, and I started with town meeting, and you heard it over and over again. Reoccurring revenues fund reoccurring expenses. So tonight we're talking about the operating budget. We're not talking about capital. We're not presenting capital. It's really what makes the town run. And that's funded for sources: property taxes, state aid, estimated local receipts, and other available funds. Money that comes in that's put into another fund, but we transfer it in to support the budget. And, one-time revenues fund one-time expenses. So when we go in for capital items, you usually use free cash or some reserves. Next slide, please. We do have a revenue policy that is in the budget book. It is part of our fiscal policy, our overall managing fiscal policy that was voted in September of 2017. And we have 4 reoccurring revenue sources, like I just stated, that support the operating budget. The property taxes represent 76% of the total revenue used to balance the budget. So the majority of the revenues is from property taxes. And this limits our increases due to Proposition 2.5. So when we approach the budget every year, the only revenue we can increase is Proposition 2 is 2.5% of the levy. And usually we do take that because we have so many increases in the budget, and just fixed increases, not just increases because we want to increase it. So what makes up our estimated local receipts is our motor vehicle excise, our hotel, motel, and meals. And those two really are driven by the economy. Really haven't seen too much of a slowdown in motor vehicle excise, maybe some timing issues, maybe just a little bit, but not too much. Departmental revenue, we have water and sewer receipts, beach, parking every year, which was a little bit declined this year than last year. Licenses and permits, our building permits have been way up. It's a good sign. Ambulance receipts have been a little bit down. Special assessments, our betterments, come in also into the general fund. And then we have investment income. Investment income has been way down. Next slide. So our local estimated receipts, we significantly decreased them in FY21. So as you look at the spreadsheet and you read your budget book, it looks like a huge increase for FY22. And that's just because we significantly decreased them in 21. So we're getting them back to pre-pandemic levels. I feel comfortable doing that. We do have some room in our estimated receipts. And I did project a state aid decrease of 8.5%. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the FY 2020 balance budget on projection of $22.6 million. I think I have a wrong fiscal year in there. I apologize. Next slide, please. And what makes up our other available funds? Our parking meter receipts, embarkation fees that we receive from the Steamship Authority and the Island Queen, wetlands and waterways, energy receipts, our solar goes in, and so we've had some money in our energy receipts reserve for appropriation. Golf revenues are doing very, very, very well. Community preservation, our bond premiums, and debt stabilization. I do want to say that this year, the FY22 budget, we will only be using a small amount of debt stabilization funds. We will not need to use larger amounts like we had to before with our projects that are funded through the trust. Next slide, please. We have the 2.5% levy capacity. We've estimated new growth at 700,000, and we are maximizing our debt drop off. So our sources of revenue, as you can see, 76.7% is from property tax. State aid is 6.4%. Our local receipts are 15.1. Next slide, please. Our appropriation policy, whenever we increase our budget, it's always with around the parameters of the strategic plan with the Board of Selectmen. And so it's always consistent with that. And we are appropriating money back into our reserve accounts. Next slide, please. So when we look at our budget increases this year, our health insurance, they haven't voted what the health insurance increase will be, but it will be minimal from what I'm hearing, if not zero. They have a lot of reserves. So what we did put in there is, if you remember when we voted the override, we had a list of, the base salary of the 8 additional firefighters, but we also had money in there for health insurance and retirement. So we have to put those monies into those line items. So you will see the increase in the health insurance line item, and that's for 160,000, and that comes from the override. Our retirement assessment, 7.42% increase, which is 666,000, and that includes the money from the override for retirement. The school, and let me back up. When we presented to the selectmen, so the select board back in September for a budget policy, because we have to be really strict with our increase in revenues, we asked, for budgets at 1.5%, and that meant the school as well. And that is a hit to the school. Usually we give them around 2.3%. So I've been discussing with this. I've been meeting with Patrick periodically, well, more than periodically, frequently, I would say. And so what we worked out is they'll need about 500,000 from their sped stabilization fund for this year only, just to bring that up. And it will be, obviously used for sped. They do have some out of district. So we're going to use that one time. But I do want to say that if we get some good news regarding state aid, that number will go down and I can, balance their budget back up. And also with Upper Cape, if we have, they haven't voted their budget yet, but if it's not a $330,000 increase, we can allocate some of that money to the school. So we're always talking about it. And the other thing I want to say about the school department, as I've been in touch with them, is they've received some pretty good money from the federal government outside of the CARES Act, well, really from the state, but I think it's funneled through the feds. It's a CVRF grant. And they've received over $1 million aside from the CARES Act. And there's also some money in this new stimulus bill that was just voted for the school department. They don't know how much yet, but we're really keeping on top of that, and we're maximizing our reimbursement from the federal and state government regarding COVID. Because as you know, the school department has been hit hard. So we've been working with them closely. They're on board with the way we're managing this. And I just, wanted to mention that. But since this is so early in the budget process, sometimes I already know what the health insurance increase might be, and I have a good idea what the state, if we think about it, the governor usually releases his budget mid-January, and they're not even close to doing anything like that. So we're early on, and we're keeping track of that. So things will change, they're fluid. And when we get good news, the school department, so they don't have to utilize that much money of sped. Next slide, please. Budget increases. So the only real budget increase that we feel that we really need to pursue is a full-time clerk in the town clerk's office. As you know, with the elections, the voting has been expanded, mail-in voting, early voting, and that's just going to continue. And that's it really taxes the clerk's office. And I know Michael Palmer's here if you have any questions with that. And we felt that was prudent, that this was it was a position that was in there before, and it wasn't funded for a number of years. And so we're putting it back into the budget. This year, we had to incorporate the housing coordinator into the operating budget. As you know, she's been, the housing coordinator has been paid from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund from monies that was transferred in for the CPC. It was approximately 3 years. We got a little bit more from that. So that you'll see that jump up in FY22. And as you recall, town meeting did vote a diversity officer. So there's half-time in the town's budget and then half-time in the school budget. And that's what was voted at town meeting. And in FY21, we had 2 new police officers just funded as of January 1st right now. So we had 6 months in the FY21 budget. So now we have to put, we're incorporating the full amount into the FY22, and the same thing with the 2 firefighters. And also it will look, when you look at the individual line items, and it looks like these big increases, and they're percentage wise, they're not. We had an adjusted wage schedule for the seasonal employees and for AFSCME, and this was all negotiated and settled before the pandemic hit. Next slide, please. I don't know. I apologize for it should say FY22 operating budget. I don't know why that happened, but I apologize. The general government 37.
We don't want to stay in 20. We want to get away from 20.
Well, when you think about it, it's fiscal
Right.
20. So maybe I was hoping, right?
Yes.
Yes, I do apologize for that. So general government is, the school department, it says 37.8%. That's just, I do want to say, when you look at these percentages, it doesn't include the 500,000 from the sped stabilization account. And also the school operates a lot on grants, right? So, and that's not included here. This is just, really from property taxes, and it gives you the percentages from all the other functions of the government. Next slide, please.
Jennifer, I might mention that some of the building and grounds costs are covered by the town, that when they look at the actual percentage of contribution from the town for the DESE, Department of Secondary and Elementary Education, that percentage goes up as a result of that, because the town contributes other ways to the school department.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Sam, and I might have glossed over it. I haven't I haven't talked about this probably in a few years, but you're absolutely right. There's a report that we do every year about what is the true cost of the education and what's in the town budget. And so it's not just, we do have monies taking care of their fields or in Parks Department, but also the health insurance. The health insurance is on our side of the ledger. The retirement, there are some, it's not just teachers' retirement, custodians and administrative staff have, town retirement. That is on our side of the ledger, and any of the percentage of time that we use actually supporting the schools. So it is a much higher increase if you really wanted to take the actual costs out, because there's a lot on our side of the ledger. And I also want to point out too, with state aid, the town side pays it's the out of district for the school choice, right? So the school will get all the money for school choice. We pay all the assessment, and we also pay all the charter school assessments. So yeah, that is a formula that is calculated every year. But for budget purposes and presentation purposes and how we vote the revenue, how we vote the appropriations, it does give us a bigger picture. So thank you for bringing that up, Sam. So in conclusion, we are projecting an economic recovery in FY22. We always have fixed cost increases that we have to put into the budget. Really takes precedence over, other increases. The budget still allows for flexibility. That is really important. Like I said, there's a lot we don't know. And this will go through Finance Committee review, and they dig right into it as well. And we continue to implementation and further exploration of the departmental reorganization and cost-saving measures. That is something that we're always looking at. Even during difficult times, what can we do to make things operate better and save money? So that's kind of a wrap for the presentation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead, Doug Jones.
So I have actually very few questions. It's amazing how much information is in this budget package. And I'm just stunned by how many of the numbers that are put forward by the department heads are able to be supported by the, they give their request and we're matching what the request is. I did want to highlight a few changes that I noticed. One is it looked like we're level funding overtime in a bunch of the different departments. And I think you're fairly confident that we can handle the overtime with the level funding and not increasing that overtime?
Yes, I do. Thank you for bringing that up. I do feel that we can do that a lot of times. If we have open positions in the regular salary line item, we might have a higher overtime. And that's what we're hoping, especially with the open positions in police and fire. Usually that is sufficient for the overtime. And, we always look at this in April, and if we feel like we need some, we'll go back in. But I really feel like it's really hard to analyze until we have a full staff, and it's been ever changing in public safety.
And on the golf revenue, I'd heard both from you and previously that the revenue was up quite a bit, but we aren't changing our estimated income from that. Is there a reason we're not increasing our expectation on that?
Yeah, because I think we've had one payment that's been a lot higher than we thought. So I didn't want to estimate it just yet. Really, the money that we're using for the golf is paying off the debt. So what we would be doing for 1 year is, like, say we used an extra 100,000. I like to get a little bit more of traction to see if this is a 2 or 3 year or 4 year. And then what I'll do is maybe I can increase it to maybe to 450 from 400 instead of taking a one-time hit, because then I'm going to have to find it again in the next year.
And my last specific question has to do with the budget page for the fire and rescue department. It looks like it's listed as their recommended and requested are the same number.
Yes.
And on the overview pages, it's different numbers, but on their detail, it's the same number. And I'm just trying to figure that out as to whether they're.
Yeah, there was some, sometimes through the budget meetings that we have with different departments, they might be requesting something and then they change their request. And so I probably just didn't change it in the overview.
Okay, because
but I can dig into that and let me have a talk with Tim. But that's probably what might have happened is on my budget overview, I didn't reduce it.
So it may have been that they reduced their requested amount to what was to be recommended.
Yeah, they might have done. Yeah, I think. Yeah, they did that after the meeting on
and
some.
So the overview just didn't change the requested amount to the lower amount. Okay.
That's usually what happens. Yes.
Great. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go with Sam, Doug, and Julian. That's how I saw your hand. So go ahead, Sam.
Yes, when I looked at page, well, I guess it doesn't have a page number, but the detail of our FY22 budget, when you run down through all of the percentage increases and decreases, the one that just jumps right out at you is the 24% increase in the town manager selectman budget. And when I went back to the detail, it appears that the big jump is actually in salaries. And I just got a question to know why that should be such an exorbitant or very large number. And welcome the correction if there's something, but the percentage there is alarming. to maybe,
Yeah,
and we've been asking all the other departments to really tighten down their budgets so that we can get through these years right now where revenues are somewhat uncertain.
right, yeah, those are the half diversity officer that town meeting voted.
Okay.
So that's 42,000. So you didn't see that in last year's budget because it wasn't in there. It was in free cash. They voted that as a separate article. And then you have the housing coordinator in there. So
Okay.
we had to put that somewhere because it's no longer funded through the Affordable Housing Fund. So that's really what jumped it up is
Gotcha.
the two positions.
Thank you.
Great.
You're welcome.
Doug Brown, and then Julian.
Two small questions. Where do we see the revenue for the payment in lieu of taxes? Like, for instance, the Steamship Authority, I think that might be a significant number. Where would I find that listed in the revenues?
Steamship doesn't pay Lewis. They don't have pilots.
They don't?
No, it's
They
embarkation.
say they can't do it. Steve
Yeah.
Sayre wrote a 20-page letter to us as to why it's against the law for the Steamship Authority to do payment in lieu of taxes. It was amazing how much research he did to prove that they could not do that.
Now that you mention it, I've heard you say that before. Thank you.
So it's just the embarkation fees, Doug.
Right.
Right. Okay. So what about, this
Not
is,
that Steamship Authority doesn't pay, it is a pass-through.
yeah, the people pay.
Yeah, convenient.
So on the paying off of the debt for the high school, when I look in the, there's like 6 categories of debt. Why are they all listed separately? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, it was when the high school was being built, it was before me. The treasurer issues the debt, and just when they issued the debt, they just bonded it at different times. So what happens is, say you have like $60 million, right, for high school. And so what the previous treasurer did was like maybe bond 10 of it. And then, as the construction, she'd go and bond another 10. Well, we try to bond everything together. We try to issue debt together. Now, what you usually do in a capital project is you'll issue short-term debt that's due in a year, and then you'll roll it over for another year. And you're just paying interest on that. But then when you go out to the bond market, what you're basically floating bonds to start paying back the principal and interest. So we try to do that together. We look at interest rates when they're low, and then we try to grab that. So last December, if you recall, we bonded, the senior center together,
Right.
the athletic field. But before me, it was just the way that the treasurer issued the debt. I really don't answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Doug?
I have one more, but I'll come back to it in a minute if I could.
Okay. Julian, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just a couple items. As the board's aware, you have a copy of the electronic as well as a hard copy of the full proposed FY22 budget. It is very extensive, hundreds of pages there. It also includes the town manager's budget message, which is a brief summary, although the brief, it's 8 or 9 pages, summary of the pages that follow it in terms of expenses and anticipated revenues, for which Jennifer has very eloquently summarized in her PowerPoint. And I also wanted to acknowledge and thank the over 30 department heads that we have joining us on this virtual meeting. They are standing by and watching as attendees and can join us to respond as panelists for any and all questions that members of the board may have. And I also wanted to note, as the board will recall, traditionally we roll out and make the presentation on the proposed budget at this first meeting in January. And in order to comply with the charter requirements and the tight timing we're given, the select board needs to conclude your review, and which is underway now, obviously, and adopt the budget at your next regular meeting, which will be Monday, January 11th, because you need to transmit it to the Finance Committee by the middle of the month. So that's really the process that lies forward. And we stand ready to answer questions this evening or follow-ups as the board may have them. And this information, as per normal protocol, will also be posted on the town website for individuals that may have questions on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. So just a reminder to the public, the way that we do it as outlined is we get this presentation. That information is then on the town website so that if you have questions or concerns, you have that week-long period between now and when we vote the budget next Monday in order to make any comments or questions to the board or join us at that meeting to raise those concerns. So that's why the process is laid out as follows. So certainly get us those questions or concerns. Nancy, I saw your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question about the money that comes out of the stabilization fund for the school. And I know things change because it's going to depend on what the schools get state aid. And so I understand that number, we really don't know because it's kind of in flux until you see what the state aid is. But if they are to take money out of that stabilization fund, will it be able to be replenished at some point? I just know how important that fund was when it was established.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. Yeah, we hope to, Nancy. I think if we replenish it, we'll probably replenish it through free cash at some point. I think the more pressing issue will be for FY23 because of what the school's base will be, right? So since we're doing this year, and they do need it for out of district, but we want to make sure that it's in their base for next year. So once we, through discussions with the school department, once we make them whole, I'd like to put that, back in there. I do want to tell you that it's invested for the long term. So they've been making, in our investments, they've been making some good gains on that as well.
That's
So
great.
they'll always get the investment income, but yeah, that will be our hope, is to, put more money to that when we can.
Thank you very much.
To clarify, you're talking about the special education stabilization. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
It's not the larger town.
Yes, I think that's what Nancy's referring to. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the SPEDS stabilization fund.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
The last question I had was on our select board town manager. When we pay for professional technical and contracting, would that be, for instance, like the McMahon report or other consultant services? Is that what that is?
I do believe for the McMahon, you're talking about the fire department report?
Yeah,
That's
just
what-
the line item.
We had a separate appropriation for that. That was part of the capital. But for the operating budget, what we'll take up from that is some appraisals, things of that nature, especially if we need to appraise some land, some, smaller contracts that might come up, something comes up with a project that we're working on, maybe something to do with the wind turbines if we're consulting with somebody. There's a whole different various issues. But with that report you're talking about, there was a separate town meeting vote.
I was just using that for an example, but I guess it's not a good one. But this is just
Yeah,
like day-to-day operations of getting work done. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jennifer, I had a question that I've had asked of me probably by about a half dozen folks, and I think I answered it correctly, but I want to just put it to you tonight. It's about the override, the funds from the Prop 2.5 override. So a number of folks have, I think part of it just comes from the fact that it's so rare that we do this. So what a number of folks have asked is, because it's taking so long because of civil service and COVID to hire those firefighters, the question is this: what happens to the money that's been generated by the Prop 2.5 as wasn't spent right away because those positions aren't filled? Can you just kind of lay that out? Because I know it's been an area of question and concern for some folks.
Sure. So the override was like $970,000. So it's sitting in a separate town meeting warrant article. Depending on when the firefighters get hired and the timing, we might encumber some of that. So that means we'll just hold it aside, not the whole thing, just a small amount. We'd have to spend that maybe in July or August, any upcoming expenses, depending on when. But the remaining of that will be closed out and it gets returned to free cash, just as long as if it was in the budget. Because when they voted the override, those monies have to go for that purpose. So if they're not hired, then that will be turned back. It will go unspent.
And is that and that process of turning it back, that is the regulatory, or maybe that's not the right word to use, but that is the manner in which it must be dealt with. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
And think of it this way, because I just want, so it was an override for an operating budget. The town decided to put it in a separate town meeting warrant article, because that way, if it didn't fly, then you have this, then the article couldn't be spent, right? So if it wasn't passed. Normally, sometimes what communities do, and they incorporate it into their operating budget. And so anytime you have unspent monies from your operating budget, whoever budget that is, it gets closed out at the end of the year. We can't spend it anymore. It's gone, it's unspent. And so what that does is it gets really kind of returned to free cash, because you have a balanced budget. So your free cash makes up your actual revenues over your estimates and any unspent budget funds. So I hate to say just, it gets returned to free cash, but it's an unspent budget fund that gets closed out and then ultimate becomes part of a free cash calculation, if you will.
Okay. And
I want to point out
one
that,
second. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I just want to point out that free cash is actually what funds our capital budget. So it's not like it just evaporates.
Right.
It actually will get used as an investment in the towns. It just won't get used for paying for those particular salaries and benefits for those individuals.
Right.
Right. That's what I was going to clarify. I know that term free cash is often, an area of concern for people when they hear that. It sounds as if it just is kind of a pot somewhere that can be drawn on. But again, town meeting through the budgets that we present, for our capital expenditures and that, for that type of money, that's where that might come from. Again, those one-time expenses, being covered by some of that. So the folks understand that it still is tracked and it's still within the, within the management of town meeting.
Right. And let me just say that we knew, and we talked about this publicly when we were going through public meetings. 8 firefighters is a lot of firefighters. So even before COVID hit, we knew that it would be hard to hire 8 right away. And we had 8 in one year, funded for 1 year. And so we talked about this through the finance committee. So what happens if you don't spend all that money? We knew we weren't going to be able to spend all that money, but it gets, part of your base into the next year. Now it's in your FY22 budget. So any unspent FY22 budget gets turned back. But I just wanted to mention that we had been talking about that because we knew that it would take a while to actually get 8 firefighters on board.
Great, thank you. Doug Brown?
I think it would be nice to keep track of that, if not just down to every penny, but just in general ledger, keep track of what amount of money that is. And in a later time, maybe attribute it to fire department services, because that was what the intent of the voters was. So maybe there'll be a new piece of equipment or something that will enhance our services.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And
There are a
link it
lot of
to-
positions that are unfilled in different departments that we're not tracking that money also. I mean, almost every department has vacant positions that are funded, and we have turned back from all these departments also.
But that wasn't a voter's override.
Well, the override we can't touch. That override money is supposed to stay dedicated towards those positions.
Well, if it goes back into free cash, then it becomes available again, right?
And I think that's where the confusion is for people.
Can you just speak to that one more time, Jen? So the 900 plus thousand, that needs to go to funding those positions that we have voted on.
Right.
If at the end of go ahead, you say it better.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
let me, all right, so we have $900,000. And so one of the things I want to say is, say we hire them in May and we have to buy equipment for them and, all the things that go on when you hire, a new firefighter, and training, because, we pay for all that. Some of that money is, we're going to leave in the article, if you will. Right, we won't turn back because we're going to spend it in probably July or August, right? but the money that we don't spend, we close it out. It's like part of a regular operating budget. For example, DPW. If you look, every year we generate a report. This is what was appropriated. This is what we spent. And this is what went unspent, right? So your unspent funds become part of a calculation for not profit, but what you can spend in the next year because you have a balanced budget. And so it's the same thing with the fire department. It's just highlighted because it's an override. So that article will just get closed out. We won't spend it anymore, but those monies get incorporated into the fire department budget. And so the fire department even now has unspent funds every year that, I think they probably had $40,000 last year in turnbacks. That's what that unspent. So every department has that. So the override just becomes part of that. Now, the first year that you have that turnback, I don't know what that will be. I don't know when they're going to be higher, but those unspent funds from that override that gets turned back becomes part of a free cash calculation. Now, that first year, I can be mindful of fire department requests, but I do want to mention that every year we've been funding the fire department equipment very healthy. We bought, we funded a ladder truck, a fire truck, ambulances. I mean, when I look at 5 years ago or 6 years ago, when I'd go out to the fire department, they hadn't really replaced their equipment or kept up with it in a long time because of the economic downturn in 2009. And so we've really ramped up that. So of course, we'll be mindful of that when I have free cash and whatever they ask for, but they're always going to ask for a lot more than what they're turning back in their operating budget, whether it's the override or not.
And just so folks understand, that turn back, whatever that amount is, will be very clear because you're closing out. So in other words, if it's $400,000 that wasn't spent, it's going to be very clear what that was. So as town meeting members, as residents want to understand how money has been spent, we will see that in the budget for that year. It'll be clear what the unspent funds were.
Right. We generate reports, and maybe sometimes people don't understand or know how to look for it, but we generate reports from our accounting system that will say, what your balance is. And, at the end of June 30th, this is what's been turned back and unencumbered. And we also generate a large spreadsheet also that has, what we call it return to revenue on that spreadsheet, but we also have, what's been funded for capital, all the transfers, like any type of town meeting action, because we have to balance all that out and, set the tax rate and all this other great stuff. But we do generate reports. So you'll be able to see the report at June 30th after we've probably encumbered part of that article. We're still trying to figure that out. What will get unspent. Yep. It'll be easy, we have the report. So.
Do we not?
Thank you, Jennifer. I just know some folks have had questions about that. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, it's in a different fiscal year, but I think we have a capital item of like an $800,000 fire truck in this upcoming capital budget, right?
Yes, we do.
And so you can see how the free cash that comes over to fund capital investment can get used for fire and rescue.
Right, it can. I'm just saying, just in the the spirit of the vote, I think we should try to keep track of it. This is an unusual year, and it was an unusual, like I said, 30-year first time we've had an override in 30 years, and the voters I think we should reassure them that it will be used for fire safety. That's what they voted for.
I agree.
Yeah. Good point.
Excellent. Any other questions for Jennifer? Jennifer, thank you so much, as always, as the other board members have noted, just really a tremendous amount of information. I really encourage the public to go, take a look at this, really utilize, we always hear from folks that they don't feel like there's enough transparency. This is like the, epitome of transparency. So I really encourage individuals to go and take a look at it. And if they have questions, reach out to us and we will get those answers from Jennifer, from Julian, from Peter, or from department heads. And then obviously Finance Committee is going to take it, as Jennifer notes, takes a real deep dive into each particular department, every line item, and then we'll, weigh in. So thank you, Jennifer. Yep, Doug Brown.
One last question. Jen, could you please remind us, when do we do the comprehensive annual financial report? Is that going to be happening every year still?
Yeah, we do it. That's really our audit, right? So
Right.
the audit was completed last week. I'm reviewing it. And that should probably be released in 2 to 3 weeks. It's usually released by December 31st. But you know, we've been a little bit behind with COVID. So I think we'll probably release it in maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, I have one other comment. Under the department goals and performance measures for the DPW Administration Engineering Division, it seems like we need to put a goal in there to basically implement plans to increase energy efficiency and reduce carbon dioxide emissions. I mean, we've just declared a climate emergency, and I think we just that's our department that consumes the greatest amount of fossil fuels, and I think putting that in as a goal is an appropriate thing for us to do. That would be a suggestion I would make.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. We really appreciate it. We'll be talking again.
Can we do
Thanks.
something about the lighting? You guys look normal, like how I know you, even though you're in person. And then I look at myself and I'm like, what happened? I don't look like me. I look like I've aged like 30 years. I hate it.
I think we all feel the same way about ourselves. It's just
Oh,
the
this
way
is
it is.
awful. I want to wear a mask now because at least when I'm wearing a mask, you'll like, look at me.
I just keep
Great
getting
idea.
further and further from the screen, so I'm just a little
Maybe I
dot.
should.
It's backlighting.
But I can't, I'm getting older. I'm like, what?
You got to have some backlighting.
Yeah, some professional backlighting. We'll put
I
that in the
thought-
budget.
I thought I did it earlier. I guess I didn't do it right. I don't know.
Oh, everyone looks, it's just hard to look at ourselves, you know, that's the thing.
Oh,
It's a
it
strange-
definitely is.
No one's used to it even after all these months, so.
My bald spot's shiny in the light.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Nice
Jennifer.
to see you. We'll talk to you
Nice
soon.
to see you. Happy New Year.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Any selectmen reports, individual member reports?
Well, I guess we should report that we had a meeting with the fire chief today to try to better understand the response time scenarios and the staffing levels. And I felt like I needed that to better understand the whole system. So the chief was kind enough to spend more than an hour really explaining stuff that I should already know. So that was very nice.
Yep, it was great to have Julian and Peter and you and I just, again, like you said, you sometimes just need to hear it again. It's like what Jennifer says to us. We hear some of the same stuff all the time, but if you're not doing it every day, it's really helpful to get that extra information. So we will be out of that meeting, we'll be bringing when we update some of the data about response times, we're going to try and present the data in a different way to kind of give a little bit more information. So we're going to see if our software is able to do that. So great meeting today. Anyone else? Okay. Julian, town manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Again, I want to thank, as I may have overlooked doing it, all the department heads who joined us this evening for their diligent and steadfast work in developing all the budget proposals. And the select board will remember this goes back to really starting with capital this past summer in July and August, and then the operating budget following it. So it's a really an intense process and a lengthy one. And we thank all of our departmental colleagues for their excellent work. Obviously, with the backdrop of COVID, it presented some unusual challenges, as it continues to in many other areas as well. So my thanks to department heads for their good stewardship on funds in FY20 concluded, and FY21 that we're in the midst of, and setting the groundwork for FY22. And beyond that, Madam Chair, my only other comment is wishing all a happy new year. And I know we'll be meeting again 1 week hence to take a look at potential adoption of this budget and transmitting to the Finance Committee. So thank you for your great questions, for your focus on this important issue, and for your engagement with the whole package. We stand ready to answer any other questions that you may have in the days to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sam?
Yeah, I think it's a good time to thank the entire staff for keeping things going, while we've been in the midst of this pandemic. I know the town hall and many of the facilities were closed for some time for visitors to coming in and out of the buildings, but that was for very good public health reasons. But in the background, things are getting done. I just got my tax bill today, so I know things are getting done. But I mean, those are important functions that have been going on. And so I want to thank everybody that's in our town staff. And in addition to that, the school department, of course, for keeping the day-to-day going and managing the overall foundation of support that we have here as citizens.
Yep. And DPW, so much got done in this town during COVID. It would have been a successful year without the backdrop of COVID. And the fact that so much got done while COVID was a challenge is just really, and while we had a lot of turnover from department heads, is just really a testament to our staff. So, just a great end of the year, beginning of 2021. Thanks to everyone. So thank you all. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Patterson, second.
Okay.
All those in favor by roll call. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Brown?
Brown, aye.
Jones?
Jones, aye.
Taylor?
Taylor, I.
English Braga, aye. Thank you all. Have a good night. See you next week.
Here's
Thank
to
you.
2021.
Yes.